It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Allen Kessel. Your Hebrew name was Isak
Isser.
And you were born in the DP camps in Germany in 1950. And we're here in your beautiful home in Jerusalem. And Allen, if you could tell us a little bit about your family surviving the Shoah, the Holocaust, you being born in a DP camp, and then eventually coming to America, and then finally to Israel.
Yes, indeed. Again, their story is not unique by any means, but it has its own specific twists and turns that definitely make it a special survival story. My father was born in Tomaszów-Lubelz in Poland, on the eastern side of Poland, and my mother was born in Milnitz, which was on the western side. And they grew up normally as far as childhood experiences, etc. But then when the war broke out, again, my mother was on the western side and they were invaded by Germany, as well as my father, who was on the eastern side, and they were invaded by Russia. So my father's family did not suffer as deeply as my mother's family. My mother, during the German occupation, lost her mother and two brothers and survived with her father and two brothers.
I think you have a picture.
And we do have a picture. This is a picture of them after the liberation, probably about a year after the liberation. Nobody's smiling because it's a fairly serious picture, but they managed to get back on their feet, and you can see that their clothes are neat and clean, and they were coming back to life, if you will.
And there's your mother and her father and her two brothers.
And the two brothers, the survivors, yes. And the reason that they survived, the short story is that my grandfather, the Zayda Shloima, as we called him, he was a furrier. Now, he did not trap the animals. The Goyim who lived in the hinterlands were the ones who actually procured the pelts, and he bought them from those suppliers, if you will. And quite frankly, their survival was dependent on the fact that he was very fair with them. He never tried to cheat them. He never tried to take advantage of them. He was always straight with them. And when they were able to finally escape the ghetto that they were in, which was the Borschtov ghetto, where they were relocated by the Germans, when they were able to finally escape, they actually went into the hinterlands and were hidden by these particular suppliers of the pelts, that because my grandfather was a fair businessman with them, and they had no ill will for Jews, and they actually did hide the family, not together because that was too dangerous for all four of them, but they did actually spend the war in hiding for the rest of the war until the Russian liberation in 1945. My father, on the other hand, he was on the side that the Russians invaded, and when the Germans reinvaded Poland against the Russians, 1940, I believe, my father had been involved in basically black marketing cigarettes. That's how they actually survived the war. And as the Russians were retreating east, he would literally go out on the road and wave a carton of cigarettes to the retreating troops, and they would stop the truck and make room for him, his mother, his father, as well as that's my father's parents, and they would actually make room for him, as I said, his mother, his father, his sister, and her husband, and they kept on moving east ahead of the war. Month after month, after year, they actually went through most of Russia. they actually ended up going as far as Tashkent and Uzbekistan. My father spoke Uzbek at the end of the war. And they were able to basically ride out the war, if you will, without too much danger being over their heads. That was again the luck that my father was able to create as a result of being able to bribe himself and his family with the cigarettes till literally the end of the war, and that kept them alive.
So who survived in his family? Did he have siblings?
He had a sister, and the sister was married at the time, and they were all together traveling east. They went through Siberia as well on the way east, so they really covered quite a bit of territory just to escape the Nazi onslaught.
If we could look at the picture again, it's amazing. So here's
a picture of my father and mother and my father's parents. That's me in the center, and that literally is on the train to the boat to America.
And your father's sister, did she survived as well?
Yes. I mean,
and she went to America as well?
No, she didn't. That's an interesting story, because that actually there's an important twist here. My father's sister's husband, he was a huge Zionist before the war. He actually arranged for Jabotinsky to come to the local population in the 30s, in the mid 30s and the late 30s, to literally talk about the foreboding danger that he anticipated would envelop the Jewish population in the in Eastern Europe, and to advocate for Aliyah to Israel. So he was a huge Zionist, and after the war, when they were all in the DP camps together, my father and mother did meet in the DP camps, and my uncle, again my father's brother-in-law, if you will, he was not going to travel to America. He only wanted to make Aliyah to Israel, and in 1948, when the Medina was established, he and his wife, and they had a daughter at that time already as well, picked up and went to Israel, and told my parents, who were just married at the time, that they would check out the conditions and see, just how life was in Israel, and would write to them and let them know, how and where they could come once they were settled. I think about 4 or 5 months later, they did get a letter from them that indicated that don't come. Conditions are very, very difficult here in Israel. We're living in tents. It's very, very hot. The climate is very unforgiving. There are scorpions. There's a hostile Arab population. And at the end of the letter was, and also don't get pregnant, which apparently was a little bit too late, because I was already apparently on the way. And my story is a very remarkable from a circumstantial point of view. I was born in February of 1950, and I was born in a Lebensborn hospital, a former Lebensborn hospital. And Lebensborn was the German program, if you will, to create the master race, literally breed the master race. And what they did is they actually set up huge maternity, almost like mini cities, with a large hospital, a large maternity hospital, and barracks, where the SS would bring Aryan women that they felt were of Aryan types, not necessarily from Germany, but from the lands that they conquered, whether they were Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Germany, Poland, Romania. It didn't make a difference. If they were Aryan looking. They would bring them there. The SS would, in fact, inseminate them. Okay, the fathers never stayed. The women would give birth to the child, and then the child, then the mother was ushered away, and the child was literally raised by a staff in order to create the master race. This was actually a program at a very large scale, and that's what this facility was. Obviously, it was no longer in operation in 1950, but it had a large maternity ward, and so that's where I happened to be born. A very, very poignant postscript to that is that after I had my bris, apparently I was bleeding to the point where I needed a transfusion of some additional blood. My father was away, not at the time. At the time, he wasn't present, and he was probably off black marketing cigarettes, quite frankly, something to that, something to that in that vein, in order to make a living. And my mother was too weak, I think, to be able to, from the birth, to supply some blood. So it turned out that the doctor who delivered me was the proper blood type, and he volunteered to give me some blood for a transfusion. When he rolled up his arm in order to insert the IV, my mother immediately noticed a tattoo that he was SS.
Really? Wow.
Because all the doctors, this was an SS facility, and all the doctors that were in fact working there were members of the SS.
And did he know you were a Jewish baby?
Of course. And so, of course, my mother literally, she spoke German fluently as well by that point. She literally was astounded and asked him and said, "You've just saved my firstborn son. You know, of course, we're Jewish. 3, 4, 5 years ago, you would have stepped on me like I was an insect and then been upset that I soiled the bottom of your shoe. And now here you are saving the life of my firstborn." And he said this was his way of doing, if you will, tshuva. This is a way for him to just mentally try to get back into a moral state again, he was not actively involved in he explained, in any of the extermination or any of the killing. He was obviously a gynecologist who was there to deliver these babies, but at the same time, he felt this was a way of atonement, that he could start to make things right in the world for the Jews and for himself, quite frankly. And that's the case, that I was actually saved by somebody who gave me SS blood, which people who know me say that explains a lot, my love of the outdoors and etc.
That's quite incredible.
It is an amazing story. Yeah. Yeah.
And your parents met in the DP camp?
Yes. They met in the DP camps, and
they got married. They got married
in the DP camps. Yes. Yes.
Did they speak to you a lot about the experiences in the DP camps?
No. It was interesting. The first generation, me being, the first generation after the war, my parents, particularly my mother, who had it much tougher, never spoke about it to us. I think she didn't want to burden us with the horrible experiences that she went through. But I recall I had a bedroom that was near the bathroom in our house in Queens, and literally 20 years later, we're talking about 1965, I recall her, the light coming out in the bathroom at 2 or 3 in the morning, and my mother was there taking a couple of aspirin because she was still having nightmares. So it's an experience that never left. Obviously, she was able to manage. A lot of them were able to manage it and carry on with their lives. But the fact is that it was very, very painful. She only started to speak about it after my wife and I, Barbara, were married, and we were visiting. We would come for the Chagim, typically Pesach. We would. This is before we had children, and my mother just suddenly, after the Seder was complete, and she was at the sink washing up, and even the lights had gone out, just a minimum number of lights. My wife was drawing, my mother was washing, and my mother just simply said, well, 25 years ago, this is when the Germans came in, because they knew about knew that the Jewish calendar would allow them to be capture Jews that were, that were concentrated in family events on Pesach. And so she basically, not because there was anything special about the occasion, but we were adults at that point, and my wife was not a child of an immediate child, and she felt compelled, if you will, to tell the story, and then that's when the stories came out. Very difficult stories, but some very heroic stories, and that's how we learned about a lot of the near-death instances that they were able to escape and persevere through those difficult years.
Do you remember any of the stories?
I do. Some of them are quite traumatic. When they were first, this is my mother's parents, my mother's family, the father and the two brothers, when they first were made it into the forest and made it into their first contact, where they were hidden by, again, these trappers who actually trapped the pelts for the furriers. They were hidden, all four of them, and that was also very risky for the individual who was hiding them, as you can imagine. He kept them, I imagine, I think for about 2 or 3 months they were actually hidden there, but then he felt it was getting too dangerous because other people would see, he was concerned that other people might see them coming or going, etc., and might betray them. And so they asked him very frankly, where could we go? Where would be his recommendation? He said, I'm not sure where you can go. I just know it's too dangerous for you to be here, and I would recommend that you split up, because 4 of you traveling together is going to be much more noticeable than 2, but I can't tell you where to go. But he did offer, and this is sincere, he did offer, he said, if I know what they're doing to the Jews, and I know how dangerous it is, and he did offer to shoot them and put them out of their misery if that's what they wanted, in order to not have to suffer under the hands of the Nazis. And they did not rule it out immediately. They actually considered it. Obviously, they didn't take him up on his offer, but that was an actual story, an actual event. My mother recalls before, while they were still in the Borstchev ghetto, they would do roundups, as you might expect, and there was also a curfew, and if you were outside on the streets after the curfew, you would be either summarily taken away or even summarily just shot on the spot. And so there was an action where they were rounding up people, and they had hiding places that they ran to. This particular day, there was a hiding place up on an attic in a building that a number of people used as a refuge. My mother, again, the action started before curfew. She ran up there. She found her father, and she found her brother and a number of other people who were hiding there, and she asked where Jack was, Yochanan, the baby. she asked where is...
It's her brother.
That's her youngest, the baby brother. And nobody knew where he was. He was still out on the street. He had not made it back to the refuge, to the hiding place. So she immediately, being basically maternal, she ended up literally raising him, becoming his mother figure. She said, "I'm going back out to find him." And everybody in the hiding place, including her father, had said, "You can't do that, because if you go out, you'll betray our position, and then we'll all be taken away." And she just would not tolerate that. And she very calmly said to them, she said, "Look, it's really pretty simple. If you don't let me out, I'm going to start screaming at the top of my lungs, and we're all going to be betrayed. So you can either let me out, and we'll take our chances that I don't betray this position, or we're all going to go down together." They did let her out, obviously. She made it to the street, and she was walking around. This is again after curfew now, and she was walking around searching for where he might be, and she did come across him finally. And she said, "Well, we have to make it back to the hiding place." And as they were retreating back to their to that attic up a number of blocks away, a German patrol came around the corner and stopped them. And her younger brother, his first instinct was to run away, and she said, "You can't run away, because if you run, they'll just shoot us. So not only are we going to not run away, we're going to walk toward them. We're actually going to encounter them." And they walked toward them. They were stopped by the Germans. My mother got into a conversation with one of the soldiers on patrol. It was rather lengthy. Turned out that he was actually flirting with her and invited her to go to a dance. A couple of nights later, she asked where that would be, and she told him that she would meet him at that point in time. A lot of why they were able to survive is they did not look Polish. They did not look Jewish. They looked like Poles. They weren't particularly Semitic looking, and that allowed them to pass not only in the camp, in the work camp, because she did remove her star, her yellow star, when she was about. But they also allowed them to, once they left the Borschtov ghetto and they were in the hiding out, they could actually go out and forage and not necessarily arouse suspicion.
Very courageous. Your mother was amazing.
Yeah, she made her luck, and at the same time, felt that she needed to apply herself in very difficult circumstances, but at the same time, being in the right place at the right time and having enough sense to and chutzpah, if will, to survive was really what it took. There were many close calls, but those were some of the more dramatic ones.
So how did you feel when you heard these stories?
So many. We ended up coming to the United States, as I said, instead of going to Israel, as my uncle and my father's sister, we ended up coming to the States, and we settled in East New York and Brooklyn. And basically the entire neighborhood was, not the entire neighborhood, but most of the neighborhood were refugee Jewish individuals post-war. So the entire neighborhood literally had the same story. A lot of, very few grandparents survived, were around, or very few parents were around, and so this whole group became an extended family. They adopted each other, and by hook and crook became an extension, created an extended family because of their shared experiences. So they didn't talk about it extensively as well. And so we all grew up knowing that we all grew up speaking Yiddish, by the way, first. My first language was Yiddish. We spoke Yiddish in the house before we spoke English. There might be a reference or two about, about an occurrence, but they didn't really go into it in any detail, again, because they didn't want to burden, if you will, us with those horrible events.
And Alan, did your father speak about his experiences?
Yeah, he did.
Do you remember any of his stories?
Well, his stories were, again, more, just being able to continually bribe his way, and with his family, further east and east and east. Siberia was a difficult time because the winters were pretty severe, but again, they were able to survive because he was able to literally pay off anybody he needed to in order to keep the family, to allow the family to survive. So it was, again, not a lot of detail, just the fact that they just kept moving further east. And again, at the end of the war, he was in Uzbekistan, in Tashkent. That's how far east they had traveled. He did say that when they traveled back after the war, they were taking various trains, and what the train did go through Birkenau, Auschwitz. It actually went, and they didn't know precisely what had happened there, but they knew that this was a death camp. This was, again, post-war already, but they did travel through that area, and clearly made an impact on them as well. But again, they didn't really know just how horrible the details were at that point. But they knew it had been a very severe place on their way back, and like so many others, they were, when they considered going back to their towns in Poland, they were clearly told that don't do it, because if you go back, you'll probably be killed by the locals.
And did they go back?
No, they did not, because they were warned that because my mother and my father, particularly my mother, when the Germans came in, they also came in with the Ukrainians at that time, and she said that the Ukrainians were so enthusiastic that the Germans themselves had to restrain the Ukrainians from the slaughter that they were perpetrating on the local population. So if my mother were alive today, what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, she'd be rooting for the Russians to wipe out the Ukrainians, quite frankly. She said the best thing that ever happened since she left was the atomic reactor blowing up in where was that again? Chernobyl. She said the water should be versammt. The water should be poisoned for the next 150 years in Chernobyl for what the Ukrainians had done to.
And she was an eyewitness. She was
She was. Horrible stories that the shaykhut of the town was taken out in front of everybody, and his head was chopped off as a result of what his profession was by the Ukrainians in front of everybody.
And Alan, can I ask, from your mother's family and your father's family, who survived?
So my father's family, the family remained intact.
But extended uncles and aunts?
Well, again, all he had was a sister. So the sister survived, and she settled in, they were in Kfar Bilu, outside Rehovot, on a moshav. And basically they ended up being Chiloni. And we are in touch, but nothing, we're not very close per se. That's with my cousins.
But did your father have uncles and aunts?
Not to speak of.
And on your mother's side?
On my mother's side, again, she had the two brothers and her father. And the two brothers are all my cousins that I grew up with were, their progeny. So that we remain close, and we share wonderful simchas together.
And what about your mother's uncles and aunts? Did they survive, or extended family?
We really don't know. I mean, I don't think so. That was it. It was very, particularly my mother's family, that whole, again, everybody who was in that western part of Poland, they actually, and many times my mother literally said that they considered themselves to be lucky, that they only lost a mother and two brothers. And they were able to survive with 4 individuals, because most of the other people were wiped out and taken
How
away.
did her mother and the brothers, how did they die?
Oh, during the German occupation, when the Germans came in, they literally, my grandfather was away on business. He was not in the house at the time, and they came into to the house. My mother was not in the house as well as her 2 other brothers, but they came into the house and they killed her mother and her 2 brothers.
In the house?
In the house. Yeah. Yeah,
It's horrendous.
Yeah. Again, this was wholesale slaughter. And then whoever survived was taken to the Borstrev ghetto, was expelled to a larger town a bit further away, where they concentrated the Jews, and then eventually liquidated that ghetto as well.
And Alan, can I ask, when your parents got to the DP camp, did they tell you how they met each other?
Well, there's an interesting story before that, because when my mother's family was liberated by the Russians, and they had actually been separated for a number of years, meaning that her father and the youngest one, Jochen and Jack, were separated from her older brother and my mother, who were hiding separately because, again, it was too dangerous, and they didn't even know if the other ones had survived. And after the Russians had liberated that part of Poland, and they were able to come out of hiding, they went back to, I guess, toward their. I'm not sure exactly where they went back, but I believe it went back toward the Borstrev area where they had been living. And my uncle recalls, the youngest one, sitting there by the road and saying to his father, said, "Look, there's Sima and Yochanan coming down the road," and my grandfather was very upset with him because he thought he was making fun, and actually slapped him across the face and said, "This is not something to make light of." And he says, No, they're really, really there. They're coming. And sure enough, they were reunited. But then the Russians, being the Russians, they were asking all the survivors, who are you? What did you do during the war? And my mother's older brother, Isidore Itcha, he at the time was probably like 18 or 20 years old by the time the war ended, maybe even older, maybe 21, 22. I think there was 8 years between them. And so the Russians asked him, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm Jochen, I'm Isidore Aschendorf. Here's my ID card." And they saw on the ID card that it is Israelish, that he's that he's Jewish. "Oh, so you were Jewish and you survived the war? Clearly you must have been a collaborator." And they put him in jail. They threw him into jail. They literally locked him up. At which point my grandfather, they managed whatever money they had been able to accumulate and maintain. They were able to go to the prison, bribe the guards to let him out, and then from there they literally knew that they had to leave the Russian environment, and they walked to the American sector in Germany. They literally walked through the snows, over the hills, to get to away from the Russian the area of Russian influence.
And then they went to the DP camp.
And then from there they settled into the DP camp.
And what was the name of the DP camp?
Steinhering. I believe that's where it was. It was now. I'm almost positive that was the camp because it had barracks because of this Lebensborn hospital. It wasn't just a hospital. It had this huge number of literally barracks to house large numbers of people, and I believe that's where they ended up meeting.
And did your parents ever mention how they met each other?
No. It was this was again. I'm not sure if they were either set up or they simply just met as a result of of being in the camp together. No, I never really.
And they had the wedding in the camp.
You had the wedding in the camp
with the rabbi, with the whole.
Oh yeah, and we have the wedding certificate. In Ulm.
It's amazing. Sure. And how long were they in the DP camp?
They were in the DP camps until from 1946 to 1950.
And you?
51, actually.
We have a certificate, your birth certificate.
Yes. Born in Steinhering.
And your name, your second name is?
My second name is Yitzhak Isser. I was the firstborn. They were hoping for a girl. They ended up having a boy. And the closest name that they could get to Esther, my grandmother's, the grandmother who was killed when the Germans invaded my mother's mother, her name was Esther, and the closest that we could get to Esther was Isser, and so that was what was my given name. I was called Isser, not Yitzhak, by my family. And then when we came to the United States, the English name that I was given was Allen. So Allen Isser became Allen, and here we are.
And did your parents ever tell you stories about in the DP camp, their life in the DP camp?
They said life was not necessarily easy. There were still tragedies that occurred, accidents, where my mother actually recalls that there was a situation where they were making, one family was making a lot of a hot stew for dinner, etc., and one of the children ran over and accidentally knocked over this pot of stew on himself and really scalded himself and ended up perishing. So there were incidents like that were occurring, but they were much more they had no fear of even though they were in a camp per se, and they were confined, they did not feel threatened by any means. And the Americans were very solicitous and very and very kind to them. They didn't obviously try to take advantage or anything like that. So their experience was one of relatively peace and tranquility. So
they rebuilt their lives. It's
after that,
quite incredible.
Yes. I mean, it's and to stay from, which was not the simplest thing. My mother, at the Seder, often had her complaints. Vehishe Abdu. She would look up and.
But your parents remained religious?
Yeah, my father. Again, my father's parents. My father's. Parents, he was a Belzer Chassid. I have another picture of him. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. I know I can find it. Let me just find it. Here we are. So my father's parents, he was a Belzer Chassid, and so my father grew up with that kind of background, and my father was actually a chazan professionally during the Yomim Narayim in East New York and Brooklyn. I mean, he had a full-time job, but his chazanus was a big part of his joy, and he actually made a few dollars out of it as well. So they remained, because he was able to, I guess, maintain his religion during the war. They stayed religious. My grandfather also, even though he suffered on my mother's side, the Zayda Shlema, even though he suffered terribly, he did also maintain his frumkeit, and he was able to pass that on as well. I remember spending a lot of time with him until he lived with us until 1963 when he passed. So I have very fond memories of him. My father's parents regrettably passed in the mid-50s, and I have just some fleeting memories of them as a 5-year-old. So I was fortunate enough to know them, but my mother's father, I really had a wonderful, strong relationship, as opposed to my brother, who's 8 years younger, who really didn't know him very well.
And Alan, you can see in this picture, how old were you in the picture?
Less than a year.
So how did your family manage to get to the States?
I think it was lottery. I think, they applied, and the number finally, through Hayas. Hayas was the main organization that was resettling Jews after the war, particularly from the DP camps. And as I mentioned, East New York, where we grew up in Brooklyn, virtually it seemed like the whole neighborhood was immigrant Jewish displaced people who actually settled there. And so there was a very strong Jewish presence in East New York till around 1963, when people started moving out into some of the suburbs.
Do you know which boat you went on to the States?
Ooh, I don't remember the name of the boat. I can tell you, though, that there's a cute story that my mother relates. It took more than a week for the boat to make it across the Atlantic, and it was a U.S. troop carrier. I can't remember the name of the boat. But it was a boat that to accommodate U.S. troops to and fro Europe, and it was manned obviously by American personnel as well, Navy. And as my mom was getting on the boat, the crew members were helping them, climb up the gangway, which was a little unsteady, and she had me in her arms. And one of the sailors, because she was having a little bit of trouble, took me from her arms and then escorted her up. And this was the first time she'd ever seen a Negro. She never saw a black person before, and was when I was handed back, she actually examined me to make sure that nothing had rubbed off. She actually couldn't understand, quite frankly, what she had experienced, but that was an honest, kind of a naive, if you will, encounter with her first African American, shall we say.
It's quite amazing. This is such a special picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
And growing up in New York, were most of your friends also children of survivors?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Virtually everybody.
And did you speak about the Shoah, the Holocaust?
No, because we really were never really, other than the fact that, you know, our parents and our grandparents, if there were grandparents, you know, survived it. That was not a topic of discussion amongst the children. I mean, we were interested in the Brooklyn Dodgers and baseball and playing outside with our friends, etc. Basically, getting back to a normal childhood, albeit the fact that our parents were all, quote unquote, looking back, were really poor, but that didn't prevent them from being discouraged, and everybody worked pretty much at minimum wage, and then we're able to start small businesses, and we're able to persevere. Kind of a Yiddish cup, and again some luck and striving. They were able to lift themselves out of out of that situation. Again, coming over with no language, no assets, no relatives to speak of per se, no extended family.
It's quite remarkable.
That whole generation. It's an amazing generation. I mean, again, I have friends who also had difficulty growing up because the parents were, very affected by it, and I wouldn't say they had a dysfunctional situation, but it was sometimes it could be a very tense environment as well. I did not experience that, but it wasn't necessarily, the straightest road as well. There were people, you can imagine, today there's all kinds of programs for post-traumatic syndrome, etc. I mean, there was nothing like that.
They never had psychologists.
No. They simply needed to get back to work and get back to life, which was really that was the antidote. Literally, get back to living and create a family and recreate their lives again, and by creating families and having children, having grandchildren, and sending them to yeshiva and maintaining the Masorah. Yeah.
And Alan, do you ever remember your parents with their friends discussing the Shoah, or discussing the Holocaust?
Not particularly in our presence. They probably may have, but not in any kind of great detail. I mean, it was always there. You could scratch, the surface, and a reference, could be made about, why you think you have it so tough. Let me tell you, you think your life is difficult because, we don't have hot water running today. Well, we didn't have any water at all. I mean, or as far as, food, you don't waste any food because we were lucky even to...
Could you not waste any food?
Oh, no.
You had to finish your plate?
We had to finish our plate, for sure.
And did your parents ever buy any German goods?
Oh, no, that's interesting. That was a no-no. They really... I consciously did not buy any German goods. And what was also interesting is that when it became later on, when it became quote-unquote fashionable, as it is today, for Jews to go back, March of the Living, back to Poland, Root Search, etc. My parents had no desire ever to go back there again. And they basically instilled that in me because so many of my contemporaries wanted to go back and see where their parents grew up, etc., in Poland, and where they were in the DP camps, etc. And I had no desire.
Not to go back to the DP camp?
I had no interest at all. One of the ironies, what was passed on to me, which was really, to this day, I still feel it. We've had the privilege to be able to travel, to do a lot of touring, my wife and I, to various European countries, whether it would be Hungary or it would be the Netherlands or Austria, Geneva, Brussels, etc., Italy. And typically we go on tours where there's also a focus on the Jewish history. And everywhere you go in Europe, this is where the Jews were. Here's the Judenstrasse. This is where the cemetery was for 5,000, for 450 years, and now there are no Jews, etc. And all of Europe is basically, from my point of view, is just one big mitzvah. I mean, it's just one big memorial. Just because it's the fact remains is that this is, with the long history of the Jews, it was. It was not they were not destined. This was not our destiny. Our destiny was here. And I remember traveling on a river cruise through Austria after we left Vienna, after we actually left Budapest on the Danube, and traveled through Austria, through the gorgeous countryside. And remarking to my wife, I said, "They don't deserve this country. I mean, the Austrians don't. I mean, this is just absolutely stunning." But yet everything is just, the ground is just blood-soaked.
In Budapest as well?
Yeah. We went to the river, to the Danube, where they have that memorial where the shoes, are lining the banks where the Jews were shot and fell into the Danube, and the shoes remained because they didn't want to. They wanted the Jews to leave the shoes so they could reuse them. The population. And this was the Hungarian police that did most of the killing. So there's no great affinity for Europe. I mean, it's beautiful, it's lovely to visit, but there's that dissonance in the background that always kind of comes to the surface. This is not where we belong.
And have your grandchildren gone on March of the Living or on the routes to Poland?
My children did, yes, because they didn't get to experience my parents as far as having a relationship with them, but they did not particularly, get into details with respect to the camps. I believe they may have done reports where they did interview my parents with respect to how they grew up and where they grew up and how they survived, but nothing graphic that would impact them. My mother said that the greatest nekama that she experienced was the fact that not only did she experience the joy of having grandchildren, but she was able to even experience having great grandchildren. And she used to her expression was, the grandchildren were interest. That's the interest on her investment. But she said, but the great-grandchildren were interest on the interest. So that was like very, very special to be able to live to see that and appreciate the fact that that they're able to rebuild the generations. And I mean, at my wedding, but my wife and I were married, there were no grandparents, and now with our children. were married. There were 4 sets of grandparents. Yes, we've come a long way, thank God.
And growing up, you had a happy home growing up.
Yeah. I mean, it was demanding. What was interesting is 8 years between my brother and myself. I always joke about the fact that we were basically 2 only children. It's like growing up as an only child. Part of it was economics at the time. I remember when you went to high school in New York, in order to graduate, you had to take what's called Regents examinations. You had to, in addition to graduating, going through 9th through 12th grade and passing your examinations, you also have to take a Regents examination, a special state-sponsored Regents, and it would be in math and in science and in English and history. And if you didn't pass those exams, you didn't get a diploma and you couldn't go to college necessarily. You would get the results through the mail, and my mother, of course, would be the first one to get the results, and she would look at the biology Regents, and she said, "You got a 97. What happened?" Apparently, what happened to the 3 points? Because it should have been 100. So yeah, it was, you really had to, you couldn't slack. You couldn't be a slacker. You had to really apply yourself and always do the best. And they strove for perfection. I'm not sure if it's perfection is the word, but you really needed to, you had to do beyond expectations. You really had to perform at a sterling level, and that was there was no laziness. I mean, my parents worked at minimum wage. They'd never even dream of collecting unemployment insurance or any kind of assistance from the government. You had to make your way through life, applying yourself and doing it independently, not depending on handouts. So there was a real work ethic and an achievement requirement. You needed to always move on and achieve greater heights, and that the next generation should be in a more shall we say a more, what's the word I'm looking for, a much more stable and nurturing environment that we could then pass on to the next generation.
And Allen, growing up, did you ever have experience any anti-Semitism? Or any anti-Jewish feeling? That was often the case. I mean, particularly growing up, even though East New York, even though where we grew up, there was a lot of very Jewish neighborhood, and during the Chagim, during Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, the streets were just packed with Jewish people. Which suburb were you in?
But the fact remains is that there were other non-Jews that lived, not necessarily the neighborhood, but going home from yeshiva. I remember on Halloween night was always, when Halloween occurred, we always used to travel in packs because we knew we'd end up being, I wouldn't necessarily attacked, but basically, sometimes, attacked physically by gangs of shkutzim, as we say. But we fought back, so we gave as well as we took. But it wasn't, it wasn't that we didn't experience it, but it wasn't anything that beyond kind of juvenile stuff. I never experienced anything from an adult or anything like that.
And what was the name of the neighborhood that you grew up in?
It was East New York in Brooklyn. So New Lots Avenue was the kind of the main street that ran through that particular section.
And the schools you went to?
Yeshiva Torah Chaim, which was the precursor of the yeshiva of South Shore, which became that all moved to the 5 towns. So that whole neighborhood ended up moving to Queens and eventually into the 5 towns. Rabbi Schmidman was the principal of the yeshiva. It was on Berriman and Harriman Street, the building is still there, but I don't think, by no means, there are no Jews left in that neighborhood.
And the Rabbonim, or your teachers, were they survivors as well?
Some of them were, yes.
And could you relate to them?
We spoke Yiddish, so that that was that was probably the extent of it. But beyond that, we didn't really get into, again, the details of what happened before. We were looking forward as far as just a normal yeshiva learning experience with respect to Chumash Tanakh and some Gemara at the end.
And Alan, looking now what's happening in America, it must be very frightening to see the tremendous changes that have occurred.
What's really it's bittersweet in a number of ways. I've mentioned this to a number of people, as well as my brother as well, that I'm almost glad that my parents are not alive to see what's going on. I mean, I don't think they could actually even comprehend that the kind of the anti-Semitism that's occurring openly within American society. America to them was really the golden Medina. I mean, my parents celebrated Thanksgiving, the American Thanksgiving, as if it were a yontif. I mean, they literally got dressed up, invited friends and family, because we could take pictures, because it wasn't a yontif. But that's how we have a lot of our family pictures, are because of Thanksgiving dinners. They really gave thanks for what America allowed them to as a haven, and allowed them to prosper and raise a family. And so what they see, if they had seen, if they were alive to see this, I think it would have been very, very damaging to their spirit. They probably, I'm not sure if they would, have friends who feel like, this is, why should America be different than any other country that we haven't, that we've been thrown at, and others that feel that America still has, the fortitude to reject this. And hopefully with the present administration, they are certainly pushing back very, very hard. And history is yet to be written on this one, and but thank goodness we have the Medinas Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, as our only real haven, and we are independent and strong enough. I was asked, theoretically, we had a discussion amongst the Shabbos table, like, when was the greatest epic in Jewish history? And was it Davidian when during the King David, or during other periods? And my answer was, right now. This is the greatest point in Jewish history, is what we're living right now. We have largest population. We have a very strong government. We have an army. We're self-reliant. We're leaders in so many fields.
There's more learning now than there's been.
There's more learning now than there ever were, period. And there's more population. I mean, Eretz Yisrael never had this many Jews in it historically, and we're a society and a nation to be reckoned with. We're not just. We're tiny in numbers and tiny in area, but we're outsized in our influence and our impact in the world, and we are in the region, even though we're the smallest, we're probably the superpower in the region, so we're certainly not going to be intimidated, and the generations that are coming up are only more, more determined to keep us not just surviving, but prospering and
thriving.
And thriving, yeah.
And Alan, what message do you impart to your children and grandchildren and to the future generations? You've already mentioned, I think what you've already said is part of the message, but you have a special message to impart to the next generation.
They're doing it. They're by their literally by how they're raising their families, how they're first of all, their families are larger. Kenena Hara. I mean, my wife and I, we have 13 B'liayin Hara, 13 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren so far. This is, that the impact that they'll have on future generations. I hope to live to see some of that. They're doing it in a observant manner. Half of my daughter and her family are here. They made Aliyah 25 years ago. Not 25 years ago, about 21, 22 years ago. My daughter is a Mioledet, a midwife at Hadassah Ein Kerem for many, many, many years. So that whole family is here already. My son is a Rebbe at TABC, that's the Talmudic Academy of Bergen County in Teaneck, and he has 6 children, and the older ones are going to be starting to come to Israel for their seminary years next year as well, so we'll be able to accommodate them here. So slowly but surely we'll get them hopefully on this side of the ledger, if you will, and that's our hope and our prayer that they should be healthy and prosper. Hopefully, with us here and with Am Yisrael, we should see great things from them and from our nation and B'Meir B'Yameinu.
Amen. And I just want to thank you. This has been absolutely incredible. It's very, very special, and your story is miraculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of...
that blood transfusion is just something...
Yeah, the transfusion was...
See if I can just come just to thank you. So for me, it's been such an honor and a privilege to be with you, and I'm extremely grateful.
Appreciate it.
And thinking that we met outside the Shiva for Lily Abbott, Alava Shalom,
yep.
And here we are in your home, and it is really miraculous that that an SS doctor actually gave you blood that saved your life.
Yeah.
And how your parents survived. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, well, there are so many hundreds of thousands of stories that replicate that in one form or another.
But we have living proof.
Yeah.
Well,
indeed.
I'm extremely grateful to you, and and maybe stream and
Amen.
And I'm really grateful. Thank you very much.
The Saras Tovas. All the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay.
And I'm really, really grateful. It's
gonna need